Section 1 of Prison Memoirs of an Anarchist by Alexander Berkman. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Kwame Genov, youtube.com/c/KWAMEGENOVV. The Call of Homestead. Section 1. Clearly, every detail of that day is engraved on my mind. It is the 6th of July, 1892. We are quietly sitting in the back of our little flat, Fedya and I, when suddenly the girl enters. Her naturally quick, energetic step sounds more than usually resolute. As I turn to her, I am struck by the peculiar gleam in her eyes and the heightened color. "Have you read it?" she cries, waving the half-open newspaper. "What is it?" "Homestead. Striker shot. Pinkertons have killed women and children." She speaks in a quick, jerky manner. Her words ring like the cry of a wounded animal, the melodious voice tinged with the harshness of bitterness, the bitterness of helpless agony. I take the paper from her hands. In growing excitement, I read the vivid account of the tremendous struggle, the Homestead strike, or, more correctly, the lockout. The report details the conspiracy on the part of the Carnegie Company to crush the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, the selection, for the purpose, of Henry Clay Frick, whose attitude toward labor is implacably hostile, his secret military preparations while designedly prolonging the peace negotiations with the Amalgamated, the fortification of the Homestead Steel Works, the erection of a high board fence capped by barbed wire and provided with loopholes for sharpshooters, the hiring of an army of Pinkerton thugs, the attempt to smuggle them in the dead of night into Homestead, and, finally, the terrible carnage. I pass the paper to Fedya. The girl glances at me. We sit in silence, each busy with his own thoughts. Only now and then we exchange a word, a searching, significant look. Section 2. It is hot and stuffy in the train. The air is oppressive with tobacco smoke. The boisterous talk of the men playing cards nearby annoys me. I turn to the window. The gust of perfumed air, laden with the rich aroma of fresh mown hay, is soothingly invigorating. Green woods and yellow fields circle in the distance, whirl nearer, close, then rush by, giving place to other circling fields and woods. The country looks young and alluring in the early morning sunshine, but my thoughts are busy with Homestead. The great battle has been fought. Never before, in all its history, has American labor won such a signal victory. By force of arms, the workers of Homestead have compelled 300 Pinkerton invaders to surrender most humbly, ignominiously. What humiliating defeat for the powers that be. Does not the Pinkerton Janizary represent organized authority, forever crushing the toiler in the interest of the exploiters? Well, may the enemies of the people be terrified at the unexpected awakening. But the people, the workers of America, have joyously acclaimed the rebellious manhood of Homestead. The steel workers were not the aggressors. Resignedly they had toiled and suffered. Out of their flesh and bone grew the great steel industry. On their blood fattened the powerful Carnegie Company. Yet patiently they had waited for the promised greater share of the wealth they were creating. Like a bolt from a clear sky came the blow. Wages were to be reduced. Peremptorily, the steel magnates refused to continue the sliding scale previously agreed upon as a guarantee of peace. The Carnegie firm challenged the Amalgamated Association by the submission of conditions which it knew the workers could not accept. Foreseeing refusal, it flaunted warlike preparations to crush the Union under the iron heel. Perfidious, Carnegie shrank from the task, having recently proclaimed the gospel of goodwill and harmony. I would lay it down as a maxim, he had declared, that there is no excuse for a strike or a lockout until arbitration of differences has been offered by one party and refused by the other. The right of the working men to combine and form trades unions is no less sacred than the right of the manufacturer to enter into association and conference with his fellows. And it must sooner or later be conceded. Manufacturers should meet their men more than halfway. With smooth words, the great philanthropist had persuaded the workers to endorse the high tariff. Every product of his mills protected, Andrew Carnegie secured a reduction in the duty on steel billets, in return for his generous contribution to the Republican campaign fund. In complete control of the billet market, the Carnegie firm engineered a depression of prices as a seeming consequence of a lower duty. But the market price of billets was the sole standard of wages in the Homestead mills. The wages of the workers must be reduced. The offer of the Amalgamated Association to arbitrate the new scale met with contemptuous refusal. There was nothing to arbitrate. The men must submit unconditionally. The Union was to be exterminated. And Carnegie selected Henry C. Frick, the bloody Frick of the Coke regions, to carry the program into execution. Must the oppressed forever submit? The manhood of Homestead rebelled. The millmen scorned the despotic ultimatum. Then Frick's hand fell. The war was on. Indignation swept the country. Throughout the land, the tyrannical attitude of the Carnegie Company was bitterly denounced. The ruthless brutality of Frick universally execrated. I could no longer remain indifferent. The moment was urgent. The toilers of Homestead had defied the oppressor. They were awakening. But as yet the steel workers were only blindly rebellious. The vision of anarchism alone could imbue discontent with conscious revolutionary purpose. It alone could lend wings to the aspiration of labor. The dissemination of our ideas among the proletariat of Homestead would illuminate the great struggle, help to clarify the issues, and point the way to complete ultimate emancipation. My days were feverish with anxiety. The stirring call, Labor Awaken, would fire the hearts of the disinherited and inspire them to noble deeds. It would carry to the oppressed the message of the new day, and prepare them for the approaching social revolution. Homestead might prove the first blush of the glorious dawn. How I chafed at the obstacles my project encountered. Unexpected difficulties impeded every step. The efforts to get the leaflet translated into popular English proved unavailing. It would endanger me to distribute such a fiery appeal, my friend remonstrated. Impatiently, I waved aside his objections, as if personal considerations could for an instant be weighed in the scale of the great cause. But in vain I argued and pleaded, and all the while precious moments were being wasted, and new obstacles barred the way. I rushed frantically from printer to compositor, begging, imploring. None dared print the appeal, and time was fleeting. Suddenly flashed the news of the Pinkerton carnage. The world stood aghast. The time for speech was past. Throughout the land, the toilers echoed the defiance of the men of Homestead. The steel workers had rallied bravely to the defense. The murderous Pinkertons were driven from the city, but loudly called the blood of Mammon's victims on the hanks of the Monongahela. Loudly it calls. It is the people calling. Ah, the people. The grand, mysterious, yet so near and real people. In my mind, I see myself back in the little Russian college town, amid the circle of Petersburg students, home for their vacation, surrounded by the halo of that vague and wonderful something we called nihilist. The rushing train, Homestead, the 5 years passed in America, all turn into a mist, hazy with the distance of unreality, of centuries. And again, I sit among superior beings, reverently listening to the impassioned discussion of dimly understood high themes, with the oft-recurring refrain of Bazarov, Hegel, Liberty, Chernevsky, Vinrod. To the people, to the beautiful, simple people, so noble in spite of centuries of brutalizing suffering. Like a clarion call, the note rings in my ears, amidst the din of contending views and obscure phraseology. The people. My Greek mythology moods have often pictured him to me as the mighty Atlas, supporting on his shoulders the weight of the world, his back bent, his face the mirror of unutterable misery, in his eye the look of hopeless anguish, the dumb, pitiful appeal for help. Ah, to help this helplessly suffering giant, to lighten his burden. The way is obscure, the means uncertain, but in the heated student debate the note rings clear. To the people, become one of them, share their joys and sorrows, and thus you will teach them. Yes, that is the solution. But what is that red-headed Misha from Odessa saying? It is all good and well about going to the people, but the energetic men of the deed, the Rametovs, blaze the path of popular revolution by individual acts of revolt against... Ticket, please. A heavy hand is placed on my shoulder. With an effort, I realize the situation. The card players are exchanging angry words. With a deft movement, the conductor unhooks the board, and calmly walks away with it under his arm. A roar of laughter greets the players. Twitted by the other passengers, they soon subside, and presently the car grows quiet. I have difficulty in keeping myself from falling back into reverie. I must form a definite plan of action. My purpose is quite clear to me. A tremendous struggle is taking place at Homestead. The people are manifesting the right spirit in resisting tyranny and invasion. My heart exults. This is, at last, what I have always hoped for from the American working man. Once aroused, he will brook no interference. He will fight all obstacles, and conquer even more than his original demands. It is the spirit of the heroic past, reincarnated in the steel workers of Homestead, Pennsylvania. What supreme joy to aid in this work! That is my natural mission. I feel the strength of a great undertaking. No shadow of doubt crosses my mind. The people, the toilers of the world, the producers, comprise, to me, the universe. They alone count. The rest are parasites, who have no right to exist. But to the people belongs the earth, by right, if not in fact. To make it so in fact, all means are justifiable, nay, advisable, even to the point of taking life. The question of moral right in such matters often agitated the revolutionary circles I used to frequent. I had always taken the extreme view. The more radical the treatment I held, the quicker the cure. Society is a patient, sick constitutionally and functionally. Surgical treatment is often imperative. The removal of a tyrant is not merely justifiable, it is the highest duty of every true revolutionist. Human life is, indeed, sacred and inviolate, but the killing of a tyrant, of an enemy of the people, is in no way to be considered as the taking of a life. A revolutionist would rather perish 1,000 times than be guilty of what is ordinarily called murder. In truth, murder and attentat are to me opposite terms. To remove a tyrant is an act of liberation, the giving of life and opportunity to an oppressed people. True, the cause often calls upon the revolutionist to commit an unpleasant act, but it is the test of a true revolutionist, nay, more his pride, to sacrifice all merely human feeling at the call of the people's cause. If the latter demand his life, so much the better. Could anything be nobler than to die for a grand, a sublime cause? Why, the very life of a true revolutionist has no other purpose, no significance whatever, save to sacrifice it on the altar of the beloved people. And what could be higher in life than to be a true revolutionist? It is to be a man, a complete man, a being who has neither personal interests nor desires above the necessities of the cause, one who has emancipated himself from being merely human, and has risen above that, even to the height of conviction which excludes all doubt, all regret. In short, one who in the very inmost of his soul feels himself revolutionist first, human afterwards. Such a revolutionist I feel myself to be. Indeed, far more so than even the extreme radicals of my own circle. My mind reverts to a characteristic incident in connection with the poet Edelstadt. It was in New York, about the year 1890. Edelstadt, one of the tenderest of souls, was beloved by everyone in our circle, the Pioneers of Liberty, the first Jewish anarchist organization on American soil. One evening, the closer personal friends of Edelstadt met to consider plans for aiding the sick poet. It was decided to send our comrade to Denver, someone suggesting that money be drawn for the purpose from the revolutionary treasury. I objected. Though a dear personal friend of Edelstadt and his former roommate, I could not allow, I argued, that funds belonging to the movement be devoted to private purposes, however good and even necessary those might be. The strong disapproval of my sentiments I met with this challenge. Do you mean to help Edelstadt, the poet and man, or Edelstadt, the revolutionist? Do you consider him a true, active revolutionist? His poetry is beautiful indeed, and may indirectly even prove of some propagandistic value. Aid our friend with your private funds, if you will, but no money from the movement can be given, except for direct revolutionary activity. Do you mean that the poet is less to you than the revolutionist? I was asked by Tikhon, a young medical student, whom we playfully dubbed Ling because of his rather successful affection of the celebrated revolutionist's physical appearance. I am revolutionist first, man afterwards, I replied with conviction. You are either a knave or a hero, he retorted. Ling was quite right. He could not know me. To his bourgeois mind, for all his imitation of the Chicago martyr, my words must have sounded knavish. Well, some day he may know which I am, knave or revolutionist. I do not think in the term hero, for though the type of revolutionist I feel myself to be might popularly be so called, the word has no significance for me. It merely means a revolutionist who does his duty. There is no heroism in that. It is neither more nor less than a revolutionist should do. Rakhmetov did more, too much. In spite of my great admiration for Chernevsky, who had so strongly influenced the Russian youth of my time, I could not suppress the touch of resentment I feel because the author of What's to Be Done represented his arch-revolutionist Rakhmentov as going through a system of unspeakable, self-inflicted torture to prepare himself for future exigencies. It was a sign of weakness. Does a real revolutionist need to prepare himself, to steel his nerves and harden his body? I feel it almost a personal insult, the suggestion of the revolutionist mere human clay. No, the thorough revolutionist needs no such self-doubting preparations, for I know I do not need them. The feeling is quite impersonal, strange as it may seem. My own individuality is entirely in the background. I am not conscious of any personality in matters pertaining to the cause. I am simply a revolutionist, a terrorist by conviction, an instrument for furthering the cause of humanity. In short, a Rakhmetov. Indeed, I shall assume that name upon my arrival in Pittsburgh. The piercing shrieks of the locomotive awake me with a start. My first thought is of my wallet, containing important addresses of Allegheny comrades, which I was trying to memorize when I must have fallen asleep. The wallet is gone. For a moment I am overwhelmed with terror. What if it is lost? Suddenly, my foot touches something soft. I pick it up, feeling tremendously relieved to find all the contents safe, the precious addresses, a small newspaper lithograph of Frick, and a dollar bill. My joy at recovering the wallet is not at a whit dampened by the meagerness of my funds. The dollar will do to get a room in a hotel for the first night, and in the morning I'll look up Nold or Bauer. They will find a place for me to stay or a day or two. I won't remain there long, I think, with an inward smile. We are nearing Washington, D.C. The train is to make a 6-hour stop there. I curse the stupidity of the delay. Something may be happening in Pittsburgh or Homestead. Besides, no time is to be lost in striking a telling blow, while public sentiment is aroused at the atrocities of the Carnegie Company, the brutality of Frick. Yet, my irritation is strangely dispelled by the beautiful picture that greets my eye as I step from the train. The sun has risen, a large ball of deep red, pouring a flood of gold upon the Capitol. The cupola rears its proud head majestically above the pile of stone and marble. Like a living thing, the light palpitates, trembling with passion to kiss the uppermost peak, striking it with blinding brilliancy, and then spreading in a broadening embrace down the shoulders of the towering giant. The amber waves entwine its flanks with soft caresses, and then rush on, to right and left, wider and lower, flashing upon the stately trees, dallying amid leaves and branches, finally unfolding themselves over the broad avenue, and ever growing more golden and generous as they scatter. And cupola-headed giant, stately trees, and broad avenue quiver with new-born ecstasy. All nature heaves the contented sigh of bliss, and nestles closer to the golden giver of life. At this moment I realize, as perhaps never before, the great joy, the surpassing gladness, of being. But in a trice the picture changes. Before my eyes rises the Monongahela River, carrying barges filled with armed men, and I hear a shot. A boy falls to the gangplank. The blood gushes from the center of his forehead. The hole plowed by the bullet yawns black on the crimson face. Cries and wailing ring in my ears. I see men running toward the river, and women kneeling by the side of the dead. The horrible vision revives in my head a similar incident, lived through in imagination before. It was the sight of an executed nihilist. The nihilists, how much of their precious blood has been shed, how many thousands of them line the road of Russia's suffering. Inexpressibly near and soul kin I feel to those men and women, the adored, mysterious ones of my youth, who had left wealthy homes and high station to go to the people, to become one with them, though despised by all whom they ever held dear, persecuted and ridiculed even by the benighted objects of their great sacrifice. Clearly there flashes out upon my memory my first impression of nihilist Russia. I had just passed my second year's gymnasium examinations. Overflowing with blissful excitement, I rushed into the house to tell Mother the joyful news. How happy it will make her. Next week will be my 12th birthday, but Mother need give me no present. I have one for her instead. "Mama, Mama," I called, when suddenly I caught her voice, raised in anger. Something has happened, I thought. Mother never speaks so loudly. Something very peculiar, I felt, noticing the door leading from the broad hallway to the dining room closed, contrary to custom. In perturbation I hesitated at the door. Shame on you, Nathan, I heard my mother's voice, to condemn your own brother because he is a nihilist. You are no better than... Her voice fell to a whisper, but my straining ear distinctly caught the dread word, uttered with hate and fear. Appalach. I was struck with terror. Mother's tone, my rich Uncle Nathan's unwanted presence at our house, the feel for word Palach. Something awful must have happened. I tiptoed out of the hallway and ran to my room. Trembling with fear, I threw myself on the bed. What has the Palach done? I moaned. Your brother, she had said to Uncle. Her own youngest brother, my favorite Uncle Maxim. Oh, what has happened to him? My excited imagination conjured up horrible visions. There stood the powerful figure of the giant Palach, all in black, his right arm bared to the shoulder, in his hand the uplifted axe. I could see the glimmer of the sharp steel as it began to descend, slowly, so torturingly slowly, while my heart ceased beating and my feverish eyes followed, bewitched, the glowing black coals in the Palach's head. Suddenly, the two fiery eyes fused into a large ball of flaming red. The figure of the fearful one-eyed Cyclop grew taller and stretched higher and higher, and everywhere was the giant. On all sides of me was he. Then, a sudden flash of steel, and in his monster hand I saw raised a head, cut close to the neck, its eyes incessantly blinking, the dark red blood gushing from the mouth and ears and throat. Something looked ghastly familiar about the head with the broad white forehead and expressive mouth, so sweet and sad. Oh, Maxim, Maxim, I cried, terror-stricken. The next moment a flood of passionate hatred of the Palach seized me, and I rushed, head bent, towards the one-eyed monster. Nearer and nearer I came, another quick rush, and then the violent impact of my body struck him in the very center, and he fell, forward and heavy, right upon me, and I felt his fearful weight crushing my arms, my chest, my head. Sasha, Sashenka, what is the matter, Golubchik? I recognized the sweet, tender voice of my mother, sounding far away and strange, then coming closer and growing more soothing. I opened my eyes. Mother is kneeling by the bed, her beautiful black eyes bathed in tears. Passionately, she showers kisses upon my face and hands, entreating, Golubchik, what is it? Mama, what happened to Uncle Maxim? I ask, breathlessly watching her face. Her sudden change of expression chills my heart with fear. She turns ghostly white, large drops of perspiration stand on her forehead, and her eyes grow large and round with terror. Mama, I cry, throwing my arms around her. Her lips move, and I feel her warm breath on my cheek, but, without uttering a word, she bursts into vehement weeping. Who told you? You know, she whispers between sobs. The pall of death seems to have descended upon our home. The house is oppressively silent. Everybody walks about in slippers, and the piano is kept locked. Only monosyllables, in undertone, are exchanged at the dinner table. Mother's seat remains vacant. She is very ill, the nurse informs us. No one is to see her. The situation bewilders me. I keep wondering what has happened to Maxime. Was my vision of the Palach a presentiment, or the echo of an accomplished tragedy? Vaguely, I feel guilty of Mother's illness. The shock of my question may be responsible for her condition. Yet there must be more to it. I try to persuade my troubled spirit. One afternoon, finding my eldest brother Maxime, named after Mother's favorite brother, in a very cheerful mood, I call him aside and ask, in a boldly assumed confidential manner, Maximushka, tell me, what is a nihilist? Go to the devil, Molokosos, you, he cries, angrily. With a show of violence quite inexplicable to me, Maxim throws his paper on the floor, jumps from his seat, upsetting the chair, and leaves the room. The fate of Uncle Maxim remains a mystery, the question of nihilism unsolved. I am absorbed in my studies, yet a deep interest, curiosity about the mysterious and forbidden, slumbers in my consciousness, when quite unexpectedly it is roused into keen activity by a school incident. I am 15 now, in the 4th grade of the classic gymnasium at Kovno. By direction of the Ministry of Education, compulsory religious instruction is being introduced in the state schools. Special classes have been opened at the gymnasium for the religious instruction of Jewish pupils. The parents of the latter resent the innovation. Almost every Jewish child receives religious training at home or in Cheder. But the school authorities have ordered the gymnasiasts of Jewish faith to attend classes in religion. The roll call at the first session finds me missing. Summoned before the director for an explanation, I state that I failed to attend because I have a private Jewish tutor at home, and, anyway, I do not believe in religion. The prime director looks inexpressibly shocked. "Young man," he addresses me in the artificial guttural voice he affects on solemn occasions. "Young man, when, permit me to ask, did you reach so profound a conclusion?" His manner disconcerts me, but the sarcasm of his words and the offensive tone rouse my resentment. Impulsively, defiantly, I discover my cherished secret. "Since I wrote the essay, there is no God," I reply with secret exultation. But the next instant I realize the recklessness of my confession. I have a fleeting sense of coming trouble, at school and at home. Yet somehow I feel I have acted like a man. Uncle Maxim, the nihilist, would act so in my position. I know his reputation for uncompromising candor, and love him for his bold, frank ways. "Oh, that is interesting," I hear, as in a dream, the unpleasant guttural voice of the director. "When did you write it?" 3 years ago." "How old were you then?" 12. "Have you the essay?" "Yes." "Where?" "At home." "Bring it to me tomorrow. Without fail, remember." His voice grows stern. The words fall upon my ears with the harsh metallic sound of my sister's piano that memorable evening of our musical, when, in a spirit of mischief, I hid a piece of gas pipe in the instrument tuned for the occasion. "Tomorrow, then, you are dismissed." The educational board, in conclave assembled, reads the essay. My disquisition is unanimously condemned. Exemplary punishment is to be visited upon me for precocious godlessness, dangerous tendencies, and insubordination. I am publicly reprimanded and reduced to the 3rd class. The peculiar sentence robs me of a year, and forces me to associate with the children my senior class looks down upon with undisguised contempt. I feel disgraced, humiliated. Thus, vision chases vision, memory succeeds memory, while the interminable hours creep towards the afternoon, and the station clock drones like an endless old woman. Section 3. Over at last. All aboard. On and on rushes the engine, every moment bringing me nearer to my destination. The conductor drawling out the stations, the noisy going and coming produce almost no conscious impression on my senses. Seeing and hearing every detail of my surroundings, I am nevertheless oblivious to them. Faster than the train rushes my fancy, as if reviewing a panorama of vivid scenes, apparently without organic connection with each other, yet somehow intimately associated in my thoughts of the past. But how different is the present! I am speeding towards Pittsburgh, the very heart of the industrial struggle of America. America. I dwell wonderingly on the unuttered sound. Why in America? And again unfold pictures of old scenes. I am walking in the garden of our well-appointed country place, in a fashionable suburb of St. Petersburg, where the family generally spends the summer months. As I pass the veranda, Dr. Semenov, the celebrated physician of the resort, steps out of the house and beckons to me. "Alexander Osipovich," he addresses me in his courtly manner, "your mother is very ill. Are you alone with her?" "We have servants, and 2 nurses are in attendance," I reply. To be sure, to be sure." The shadow of a smile hovers about the corners of his delicately chiseled lips. "I mean of the family." "Oh, yes, I am alone here with my mother." "Your mother is rather restless today, Alexander Osippovich. Could you sit up with her tonight?" "Certainly, certainly," I quickly assent, wondering at the peculiar request. Mother has been improving, the nurses have assured me. My presence at her bedside might prove irksome to her. Our relations have been strained since the day when, in a fit of anger, she slapped Rose, our new chambermaid, whereupon I resented Mother's right to inflict physical punishment on the servants. I can see her now, erect and haughty, facing me across the dinner table, her eyes ablaze with indignation. "You forget you are speaking to your mother, Alexander." She pronounces the name in 4 distinct syllables, as is her habit when angry with me. "You have no right to strike the girl," I retort defiantly. "You forget yourself. My treatment of the menial is no concern of yours." I cannot suppress the sharp reply that springs to my lips. "The low servant girl is as good as you." I see Mother's long, slender fingers grasp the heavy ladle, and the next instant a sharp pain pierces my left hand. Our eyes meet. Her arm remains motionless, her gaze directed to the spreading blood stain on the white tablecloth. The ladle falls from her hand. She closes her eyes, and her body sinks limply to the chair. Anger and humiliation extinguish my momentary impulse to rush to her assistance. Without uttering a word, I pick up the heavy salt cellar and fling it violently against the French mirror. At the crash of the glass, my mother opens her eyes in amazement. I rise and leave the house. My heart beats fast as I enter Mother's sick room. I fear she may resent my intrusion. The shadow of the past stands between us. But she is lying quietly on the bed and has apparently not noticed my entrance. I sit down at the bedside. A long time passes in silence. Mother seems to be asleep. It is growing dark in the room, and I settle down to pass the night in the chair. Suddenly, I hear Sasha called in a weak, faint voice. I bend over her. Drink of water. As I hold the glass to her lips, she slightly turns away her head, saying very low, "Ice water, please." I start to leave the room. "Sasha," I hear behind me, and, quickly tiptoeing to the bed, I bring my face closely, very closely to hers, to catch the faint words, "Help me turn to the wall." Tenderly, I wrap my arms around the weak, emaciated body, and an overpowering longing seizes me to touch her hand with my lips, and on my knees beg for her forgiveness. I feel so near to her. My heart is overflowing with compassion and love. But I dare not kiss her. We have become estranged. Affectionately, I hold her in my arms for just the shadow of a second, dreading lest she suspect the storm of emotion raging within me. Caressingly, I turn her to the wall, and, as I slowly withdraw, I feel as if some mysterious, yet definite something has at the very instant left her body. In a few minutes I return with a glass of ice water. I hold it to her lips, but she seems oblivious of my presence. She cannot have gone to sleep so quickly, I wonder. "Mother," I call softly. No reply. "Little mother, Mamochka." She does not appear to hear me. "Dearest Golubchik," I cry, in a paroxysm of sudden fear, pressing my hot lips upon her face. Then I become conscious of an arm upon my shoulder, and hear the measured voice of the doctor. "My boy, you must bear up. She is at rest." Section 4. "Wake up, young feller. What you sighing for?" Bewildered, I turn around to meet the coarse, yet not unkindly face of a swarthy laborer in the seat back of me. "Oh, nothing. Just dreaming," I reply, not wishing to encourage conversation. I pretend to become absorbed in my book. How strange is the sudden sound of English. Almost as suddenly had I been transplanted to American soil. 6 months passed after my mother's death. Threatened by the educational authorities with a wolf's passport on account of my dangerous tendencies, which would close every professional avenue to me, in spite of my otherwise very satisfactory standing, the situation aggravated by a violent quarrel with my guardian, Uncle Nathan, I decided to go to America. There, beyond the ocean, was the land of noble achievement, a glorious free country where men walked erect in the full stature of manhood, the very realization of my youthful dreams. And now I am in America, the blessed land. The disillusionment, the disappointments, the vain struggles. The kaleidoscope of my brain unfolds them all before my view. Now I see myself on a bench in Union Square Park, huddled close to Fedya and Mikhail, my roommates. The night wind sweeps across the cheerless park, chilling us to the bone. I feel hungry and tired, fagged out by the day's fruitless search for work. My heart sinks within me as I glance at my friends. Nothing, each had morosely reported at our nightly meeting, after the day's weary tramp. Fedya groans in uneasy sleep, his hand groping about his knees. I pick up the newspaper that had fallen under the seat, spread it over his legs, and tuck the ends underneath. But a sudden blast tears the paper away and whirls it off into the darkness. As I press Fedya's hat down on his head, I am struck by his ghastly look. How these few weeks have changed the plump, rosy-cheeked youth. Poor fellow, no one wants his labor. How his mother would suffer if she knew that her carefully reared boy passes the nights in the... What is that pain I feel? Someone is bending over me, looming unnaturally large in the darkness. Half dazed, I see an arm swing to and fro, with short, semicircular backward strokes, and with every movement I feel a sharp sting, as of a lash. Oh, it's in my soles. Bewildered, I spring to my feet. A rough hand grabs me by the throat, and I face a policeman. "Are you thieves?" he bellows. Mikhail replies, sleepily. "We Russians want work." "Get out of here! Off with you!" Quickly, silently, we walk away, Fedya and I in front, Mikhail limping behind us. The dimly lighted streets are deserted, save for a hurrying figure here and there, closely wrapped, flitting mysteriously around the corner. Columns of dust rise from the grey pavements, are caught up by the wind, rush to some distance, then carried in a spiral upwards, to be followed by another wave of choking dust. From somewhere, a tantalizing odor reaches my nostrils. The bakery on 2nd Street, Fedya remarks. Unconsciously, our steps quicken. Shoulders raised, heads bent, and shivering, we keep on to the lower Bowery. Mikhail is steadily falling behind. "Damn it, I feel bad," he says, catching up with us, as we step into an open hallway. A thorough inspection of our pockets reveals the possession of 12 cents all around. Mikhail is to go to bed, we decide, handing him a dime. The cigarettes purchased for the remaining 2 cents are divided equally, each taking a few puffs of the 4th in the box. Fedya and I sleep on the steps of the city hall. Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh. The harsh cry of the conductor startles me with the violence of a shock. Impatient as I am of the long journey, the realization that I've reached my destination comes unexpectedly, overwhelming me with the dread of unpreparedness. In a flurry, I gather up my things, but, noticing that the other passengers keep their places, I precipitately resume my seat, fearful lest my agitation be noticed. To hide my confusion, I turn to the open window. Thick clouds of smoke overcast the sky, shrouding the morning with sombre gray. The air is heavy with soot and cinders. The smell is nauseating. In the distance, giant furnaces vomit pillars of fire, the lurid flashes accentuating a line of frame structures, dilapidated and miserable. They are the homes of the workers who have created the industrial glory of Pittsburgh, reared its millionaires, its Carnegies and Fricks. The sight fills me with hatred of the perverse social justice that turns the needs of mankind into an infernal of brutalizing toil. It robs man of his soul, drives the sunshine from his life, degrades him lower than the beasts, and between the millstones of divine bliss and hellish torture grinds flesh and blood into iron and steel, transmutes human lives into gold, gold, countless gold. The great, noble people. But is it really great and noble to be slaves and remain content? No, no. They are awakening, awakening. End of section 1.